Good day. Welcome to another edition of the Africans in America podcast. With me is Weruche Uzoka.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we want to discuss DNA testing. But before we go into the DNA testing, we want to call on people who watch our programs to subscribe, share, like, make comments. The Africans in America podcast is slowly gaining traction. We can see that by the numbers that it's trending up, but it's trending up slowly, but it's trending up. We thank those of you who are watching our programs, and we urge you to continue to watch them, share our content, and like them, make comments in them. Today we want to talk about the African immigrant and DNA testing. DNA testing in America is a very important reality these days for the African American community. The African Americans who felt highly disconnected from the motherland in Africa have been making efforts to try and trace back their ancestry. We know from the reports that Oprah Winfrey found out she was from Cameroon. Samuel L. Jackson found out he is from Gabon. Ludacris also is from Gabon. And Stevie Wonder has even gotten Ghanaian citizenship after he found out that he had Ghanaian heritage. But today's discourse is on the African immigrant and DNA testing. DNA testing is very critical for some people who want to complete their immigration process through family reconnections. They need you to prove that you have ties, genetic ties to whoever you're trying to file for. But beyond that, the connotation when you talk about DNA testing to an African immigrant, it comes with so many connotations. Many people have many interpretations of it. But the most common one is the one I think is the one that has to do with proving paternity of a child or of a child, contentious paternity. But beyond this contentious paternity of children, it is very important, I dare say, to know your DNA or contribute to the growing pool for DNA testing because DNA testing is more important as a health tool and as a mapping tool these days for the Genome Project and as trying to know the place of Africans as a health tool also because genetics is very important in the kind of getting health outcomes. We as African immigrants are very susceptible to one form of one health condition, especially that we all know, sickle cell. And genetics and gene and DNA testing helps to find out all these things. But when an African immigrant talks about DNA testing, and I dare say when he explains it, I want to do a DNA test to probably a friend, a neighbor, people will be like, what may that imply? Is there something you are trying to find out? Weruche, what is your take on DNA testing and what is your own personal experience? Because before we even came on the program, you told me you had a personal experience regarding DNA testing.
hmm Yeah, I mean, my take on DNA testing is that it's necessary, right? I'm grateful that we have that as a tool to help African Americans, and not just African Americans, everyone who wants to find out about their ancestry. I'm grateful we have that tool. Again, it's an emerging scientific system. And it's going to face its own complications. It's still changing over time. And so, yes, one of the reasons why a lot of us Africans haven't done it yet is because of how they store our data, where we have high concerns about that. And so, yes, I think it's a very, very useful system tool that has emerged to help us find ancestry, especially in the specific case of African Americans. But I note that Africans have that concern. a lot of Africans I've spoken to have that concern about how their data will be stored, what is going to be used, because I find out that they find out that these DNA companies sell their data and all of that. It's very concerning. Now, when it comes to me, when I heard that Lupita Nyong'o was able to trace the fact that she has the Eve gene, it opened up this thing for me where I started to wonder, like, is there a possibility that more African women, at least African women that know their heritage, right? More African women could potentially have a link to mitochondrial Eve. And so even prior to this, I used to run the culture series with another lady, and we had talked about it, and we wanted to find out like ways to do our own testing, right? And so I called Yale, right? And went through some bureaucratic, it was access is difficult usually when it comes to things like this. Long story short, I eventually spoke with a lady, and she says to me, unfortunately, they can't just run tests unless the tests are specific to maybe illnesses or like research for a particular thing that is predominant in a family. At the time, my mom was in America at that time as well. And she was like, is there a chance we could, she asked about my mom's health, and she was like, is there a chance we could have my mom, you know, come into like it, because that would be more specific to what we're discussing. And then I could now piggyback off of my mom's results and then also, do the research. So it did sound a bit complicated. And so for that reason, I just backed away because already saying, oh, they need to find it, it has to be, it sounded like we were going to be now putting yet another pool of research. Again, it's okay to do these research things. I'm fine with it when they send me email and say, do you want to be participating in this research? I mean, that's how we build data. Again, our fear is what our data is going to be used for, because it's been
You
documented.
don't want to show up in FBI most 10 most wanted by mistake.
Most wanted, exactly. So you want to wait until you're sure that the gathering process, the way it's kept and all that is
The
is is
privacy,
is
the
ethical.
privacy.
It's ethical. Is good. Is up to par. So it sounded like a lot. So I said I wasn't going to do it. And so that's my experience. And I still do want to tests, because as Africans, we depend a lot, or we have depended a lot on oral history. Oral history. I love it, but it's the bane of our existence, quite frankly, because a lot is lost, right? Unintentionally. We've lost a lot of our history and our data due to just depending on word of mouth and passing down information. And so, yes, the way we've always depended on our heritage or finding out our heritage has been oral history, but this new method is a good one, and I think I embrace it, quite frankly. But yeah, the downsides are
Yeah,
the very
the concerns are very pertinent. If you have any comment regarding this topic we are discussing, share your comment, especially as to why you will do it or why you will not do DNA testing as an African immigrant. We are not limiting the scope of African immigrant this time now to America. We are just talking about African immigrants in diaspora. There's a very, from our research before this program, we found out that there's underrepresentation of Africans in the genetic pool. There's this great Human
exactly.
Genome Project, and while there's a clear genetic map of most other people in Asia, Caucasians, and all these other people there's underrepresentation for Africa, and this underrepresentation has been addressed, funny enough, by one Nigerian professor in the National Institute of Health, who incidentally, at the National Institute of Health here, manages the genome project, research project there. And he has tried to make the Africans more aware about this genetic the need for genetic and DNA testing.
Mhm.
The benefits from what I gather includes the fact that you can discover some members of your family, even right here, that you didn't even know you were affiliated. So family discovery and then, but the most important one, the medical awareness of the conditions that may afflict you. These days they have all these markers in your gene that tells you that you're susceptible to some things, and prevention
Mhm.
is really better than cure. The other day, I went for a colonoscopy, and a colonoscopy, I think all these things are hereditary. They tend to have some form of some hereditary factors to them. So there are benefits. There are very many benefits of it. But beyond the concern, Weruche, what
Mhm.
else why would you urge people to do DNA test? Anyway, I don't know what side of the divide you or what side of the argument you're on, but uh,
Why will I encourage people?
yeah,
Because the data pool, right, has helped a lot of people find out more about, like we said, you just mentioned lost siblings and family relations, and missing gaps, right? Missing pieces,
mortuary connections.
so since I mean, I think that if you're able to add to that conversation, I think it's better than it's a better, it's good. You understand? If you feel safe enough to add to that conversation by getting your data analyzed and stored for future references, and I think it's good because as Africans, it's interesting to hear that we're the ones that haven't gone to, again, there's that feeling of, oh, we know where we're from. You know how Africans tell you, oh, I know my papa backyard, I know where I'm from, type thing, right? Yes, I know that it will come from a strong sense of understanding one's cultural heritage, yes. But so my side of the divide would be, if we can get past the privacy issues, right? If we can be guaranteed, again, there's nothing that can be guaranteed. They made us all make passwords for email and banks, and every day we're dealing with people saying, oh, the system was hacked and all that. So there's no guarantee. I already know that. But if there can be a guarantee, it is very necessary, because I have watched stories of people, not necessarily Africans, but Western people who have found their long lost sibling or their long lost aunt. And especially for people who were adopted, who didn't even have a sense of where they came from, right? Except for their
Mhm.
adoptive families and all that. And then they find out that, oh, this is what happened. They found their mom, this and that. Basically, I like the DNA process. I like, not process necessarily, but I like the fact that it exists and it assists. However, the data issue, the privacy issue is a big one. So for me, yeah, that would be a big one. And to be honest, when I thought about getting my Eve gene, the mitochondrial DNA testing, I didn't even think the privacy issues. It was actually my daughter that says to me, Mommy, that is not exactly, the best route for now, because I've heard of a lot of things they're doing and all that. You might want to hold off. And it did make sense, but I'm not going to move in fear, because I want my data analyzed, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So yeah.
I get the sense that if I do the DNA test, I might be closely related to someone like let me make my choices. Maybe someone like Warren Buffett or someone close to Bill Gates.
That's funny. I
You don't
personally
think it
think
you don't think it can happen?
it's possible. It's possible, but I personally think that my mom's family, right, even just based on their looks, could have been from East Africa. Then my
Yeah.
dad's family, more from Senegal, right? But
Oh
again,
yeah.
all our ancestors were migrants. They
Yeah.
migrated and they intermarried. And so we're talking like 10 generations away, 15 generations away. And so for
Yeah.
me, when to go back to your question of what do I think about it? I think it's good for us to begin to understand our makeup, right? My brother and I once said, oh, it'd be interesting to go see how they're going to come up with what they're going to come up with if both of us go get tested, right? But the reality is, these companies, as much as people criticize them, some of these earlier companies that started the DNA thing, they're doing an amazing job with whatever data they have to and they update it. I just found out that their data pools get updated. And so if you maybe tested and you were like 55%, you could come back and see that, oh, there's a stronger
Yeah.
link to a
Accuracy.
thing. Accuracy. So they because they get more, the more data they get, the more it expands. Again, we're worried about privacy, but I think that those companies are doing a great job and all that. But my brother and I thought it would be great to see what they'll say about us, knowing that we know our heritage and we're related. And so it's something that is still in the works. We think it's a very valuable tool. I think I'll
Yeah.
do mine for service reasons, just to add to the data pool to see,
Okay. Since you don't find it likely that I'll be related to Warren Buffett, then I think I'll find a way to work my own DNA to connect me to Aliko Dangote. But
you won't, I won't be surprised if you're related to him.
yes, but indeed it is very important. You see, let's now talk about the health implications of the DNA testing and the adding and contributing to knowledge about African genes on the genetic diversity of Africans.
You
More
say
so,
that
this
the
is very
health concerns?
yeah, the health part of it, because you see the
Okay.
diversity of it from what I have gathered, Charles Rotimi, a very prominent professor there in the National Institute of Health, who leads this genome project, research
Yes.
project. He crafted a H3 system where they conducted a lot of African specific research to find out why we are so predisposed to something as vital as sickle cell. These things are very important for people in trying to identify what your predisposition is and how they
Mhm.
can come out with efficacious drugs, especially
Mhm.
because when we are not represented in the gene pool and in all those things or genetic research, they can't make effective drugs for the Africans. The drugs they make will be effective and efficacious for the sample and the people on which they have done this research. So arguing for people to try and do contribute to this, especially whenever there's a call, because sometimes, from what I've gathered, DNA testing is very, very costly. But sometimes government institutions try to get samples and they do these things for free. Like you said, you get these emails, right, now and then. And if no other consideration at all, that in trying to improve the diversify the map of Africans as we are. You just said it. You feel that you can be Senegalese. They are Bantus. We know that the
Or
Akrans in
Ethiopian
Ghana are
even.
different. We know that the ones in Namibia are different, like that, and they all have different predisposition. But as African immigrants now, we know the concerns. Police, the FBI, what will they do with your data? How will this now end up showing up and connecting you to one unknown crime you never even heard anything about, you had no
Exactly.
inkling for, and nobody wants trouble. Besides, it's not cheap anyway. We were just talking about 23andMe, and I guess it's because it wasn't so cheap that 23andMe is folding up. Um,
Oh, they're folding
besides
up.
all one of them is folding up. I don't know which one, but I think it's 23andMe. They filed for bankruptcy. Sometimes when they file for
Oh,
bankruptcy protection, it just means that the expense and the revenue are not balancing out. And that may
yeah.
have to do with the fact that they are quite expensive. What other considerations do you have in mind when we're talking about this topic?
Considerations in terms of negatives or positives. I mean, for me, the focus is I like that they can reconnect lost relatives,
Family
right?
members.
I like that. That's a key thing for me. Except for the data, how the data is going to be handled, I don't see that's the only negative I see. Everything else is a positive. So, for instance, when the lady said to me, you have to have a predisposition to something, right? What could your mom possibly have a predisposition to? I said, my mom is one of the healthiest people I know, right? I don't know what I could come up with. At the time, this is what was my response to her. So I said, maybe lactose intolerance or something. I don't know. That's just like what comes up, off the top of my head, which is very common with Africans, most Africans, right? And so I'm trying to tie that to the fact that, you know, first of all, the rigmarole that you have to, the bureaucratic thing you have to be exposed to when trying to even gather your data, trying to just get your gene tested and the gene testing, that's a negative, but the fact that you're able to trace why maybe lactose intolerance or whatever other ailment in your family is specific to your roots or to your family is very helpful. I like that part. I like to, find out that, okay, it is really, resident in this lineage or whatever. And then I don't know if they're going to give you ways to, combat it. I don't know what the necessity of gathering the information to track the health concern is, because already, if you're already feeling the symptoms, right? What are they going to do because again, I have to read up about it, but what is the value added if I say, okay, I'm lactose intolerant and my mom's lactose intolerant? We can see it, we already know. What are we trying to trace? Maybe they're trying to trace a particular thing that's missing in your system as compared to others that they've observed. And maybe with that, you'll know how much maybe minerals or vitamins you need as compared. I remember once my daughter had this leg bone thing, and then we went to a doctor, and she said to me, I have found that most athletes, right? Most people with darker skin colors, most people with Native Americans and people from the African, from Africa, that you guys suffer a lot of bone problems. And that's because of a lack of DNA. I'm sorry, a lack of
Calcium,
vitamin D.
vitamin
Vitamin
D.
D.
Okay.
She said that this has been her research for many years. An elderly woman, she's Asian. She said this has been her research. What's she trying to say? That we need more vitamin D. Darker skinned people, because the sun penetrates due to melanin and all of that, is a little more
Mm.
complicated with the way we can absorb vitamin D. And so I'm beginning to see that or understand that maybe that's what these tests are about. But she says a lot of athletes always have either broken bones or this or that. And her advice to us Black people, as well as Native Americans, that is that we should do more vitamin D, oral vitamin D, right? And so what am I saying? A lot of these research things are going to help us in the future, probably now and then in the future. And so I would support it more than I would fight it. I would be encouraging, but then maybe find ways to push policies, right? That will, ensure that those companies are responsible with the data. Again, we cannot guarantee. You just mentioned the FBI possessing it and doing this and that. Who even want to think the FBI is bad? Like I'm still leaning towards CIA, FBI. They're very good. I'm one of those ones in that category, right? And so I don't know why they would want to do that. And again, it's policies. You want to ensure that the people at that point are doing what they're supposed to do and not abusing their power on all levels, be it the company, be it the FBI, be whoever. So policy, 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 push policies to ensure that these groups that are gathering our data are storing our data right. Because it's not, some companies claim that they can destroy your data. Again, they can claim to destroy your data on paper, but still possess your actual data. But you also think of the fact that if they were even to store your data and use it responsibly, there's nothing wrong with it if it's helping the conversation of this DNA or even tracking or mapping the illnesses. If it's stored and used responsibly, we're fine with it too. So that's kind of one of the many conversations that I bet you are being had across the board and all that. So yeah.
But don't forget also people they hack data a lot these days, and those we don't know if they've been hacking and getting health DNA data like that, but who knows? We know that as Africans we are predisposed to diabetes, we are predisposed to hypertension, we are predisposed
Strokes,
to obesity and stroke. You know, that's
stroke,
hypertension comes off this, and our sickle cell predisposition also. And it is only through giving our DNA and getting to be part of the genome mapping project that we will get better access to specific drugs that are very specific to our needs. In fact, when I was going through the immigration process, there was one particular doctor who said, look, most of the African immigrants he had dealt with had a predisposition to having latent TB. He said that
mm,
the TB is not there. You don't have it. Because the reason being that most African immigrants have already been inoculated for tuberculosis before coming here. But
but we came.
that particular bacteria has a way of floating in the system somehow, and
Yes,
then so it
present.
becomes latent. And because they don't want it to be ever come out again, they give you antibiotics so that you suppress it further. But they acknowledge that you don't need the antibiotics, it is latent, but they just don't want it to flare up. And it doesn't even mean that after taking that antibiotics, it doesn't mean that it will be out of your body. It will still be there. I'm like, so we get to know that we as Africans, we have all these predispositions and all that, and that
Yeah.
there's an effort, especially being led by Nigerians, to try and get more Africans to give out their DNA to be part of this mapping project. And the man has won so many awards
Stealthily
for
to
this
be
endeavor, for this effort, and it will be a good thing if we as African immigrants also support him in giving
it's
out our
research.
DNA. It's research. The only thing is that, it's very frightening. Just show up one day and some people knock on your door and they say, hello, hello, we are FBI. Somebody, you are connected to somebody that they wanted in 1952. I mean, these are the kind of things we see. We see these days. Weruche, what other talking points would you want to share regarding this topic?
Think we've covered it well. Again, everyone's concern is how their data is going to be stored. Some of the reasons why people do the DNA at all is because of exploration, historical, cultural exploration, learning about genetic migration patterns and ethnic breakdowns. Like, I think very, very strongly that my mom's people are from East Africa. And
Oh,
I would want to see, like, I wish I could have had her do her own DNA, but that's fine. I can still do mine. I would like to see that. So it's the reasons are very valid. It's also even just the fact that we've come to a time when, especially with African Americans going back home, it's important we map our ancestry. You don't want to find yourself getting married to someone who remotely is related to your clan or to your you know what I mean? To your
mhm.
you know what I mean? You don't want, because there's so much, it's been dispersed. I know they're far removed, right? They would be far removed from us, but it will be a way to just sort of, bring closure, number one. And then number two, just ensure that people are not getting married to siblings, long lost siblings by some
Oh, yeah.
chance. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's one lady. I keep talking about this woman when I wrote the Princess Naku series in 2021. She came from the Bioko paradise of Equatorial Guinea, right? And I had written a book, right? The particular book I wrote had to do with Equatorial Guinea and all that when the princess went to that country. And she was so excited to buy that book. And she said she had just done her DNA ancestry and found out that her mom's people were from the Bioko Paradise region. And so when she did her little Google research, she found the book and she was excited to purchase it. And what am I saying? There are people out there on a daily basis constantly trying to map their heritage. You understand? It can't be wrong service. It is good service. I love DNA. But as with anything that humans do, there's always you have to leave a little space for error or people
A
just
little
being
comma.
a little comma, as Nigerians would say, you have to leave a little space for some miscreant who just has this brainwave to do something silly. That's human nature. But what are you going to do? What about the people who are depending on the information that they're going to get from this? So it's something I totally, totally have considered. I am still going to check my DNA, but I have to make sure it's a reputable service. There's this Black group. I think there are two groups that are, and actually they were even saying that they could do the mitochondrial testing without the whole rigmarole. You don't need to present with a particular ailment for them to try to find out all that. They can just test based on that, and they have, being that it's focused on Africa, their data pool is larger. It has more that can, in other words, I think that means automatically it's more accurate, but there's no 100%. That's what I need you to know. There's no company as at today that's going to be 100% with their data, with their gene mapping of a thing. Yeah, that's what I think. But I think it's a good service. I like the idea of it, and I'm still going to explore it. So yeah.
For me, I lean on it. I support it very well. I know that in these days, in all the pharmacological research, in all the research in trying to bring out efficacious drugs for human beings, the
Mhm.
African sample is not well represented. And any
Correct.
contribution in trying to get a better understanding of the pharmacological makeup of Africans, either as immigrants or those back home, it will be very appreciated. So we will encourage, because these days, even the vaccines, you remember now, they just came up with the malaria vaccine. And one of the
Mhm.
places they had to test that malaria vaccine, because we were the most susceptible to it, was in Africa. And it was only recently
Mhm.
that Ghana and I think one or two other countries approved that vaccine. And the efficacy of
Right.
that vaccine is very critical because malaria kills over 500,000 babies in Africa every year, much more than any other disease. And also, when we look at the fact that knowing your ancestral health is very important these days, they always ask, every single person here in America tends to know who in their family has breast cancer, how susceptible their family members are to the various shreds of cancer out there: lung cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and all that. And they take active action in stopping them. I think they have some famous actresses who have even gone, they just went to do a mammogram and removed they did mastectomies, very massive ones, before they even came back down with cancer, because they know there's a history of cancer in their family. And these are the kind of things and this gives you longer life and all that, so that you don't blame somebody in the village when you can't explain one disease. You start saying that it's juju from way back home, and it is somebody in your community that doesn't like you. When we take these actions, we help science, and when we help science, we get better outcomes for us as Africans. Weruche, do you have one last word before we close for the day?
Just want to make a statement that, people argue that African ancestry is best preserved through oral history, right? It's more trusted than Western DNA databases. My only thing about that is, again, like I said earlier, I don't think that we should shun modern science that so far has proven more right than wrong. And so anyone who's shunning African, like who prefers oral history, I'm not opposed to oral history, but it's been impractical for some time because we've lost a lot of information. And so based on that, I think that storing our information through these databases should be a consideration going forward, right? Even if not our generation, maybe generations after us should begin to, because we need the information. And especially
Okay.
because we are a group that were decimated for the most part, for some time. I don't know how long ago. I think 400 years, 400 and whatever. So we are the particular group that absolutely should depend on DNA testing. And that goes not just for the people who are seeking, but for us who are home. We need databases that are reliable and trustworthy. Makes sense? I think
Mm,
everybody is a responsibility to contribute to that database.
yeah, yeah. Especially as we come also from a place where they have some of the most vicious venoms and all those things that, snakes and malaria and very
Mhm.
vermins that you can't even imagine, that
Yeah.
little things that will give you some crazy diseases.
Mhm,
Anyway,
mhm.
thank you very much for following us to this far in the program. I think we will continue to discuss this program, this topic. It's pertinent that we will do it. We should do it if you can afford it, or if you have access to free DNA and offer, please do it. It will help research.
It was.
And well, before we go, we'll call on you to comment, subscribe, contribute by sharing your knowledge about what we have just discussed, and share our content, tell people about our podcast. It is focused mainly on the African immigrant in America, but we'll also talk about other things that affect Africans in diaspora and
Yes.
Africans back home.
All right.
Weruche, thanks again for another wonderful time together. You
Thank
all have a
you.
wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.